Then one of the last principles, I hope you can soak it all up, because it's a lot of info, but I think the presentation will also be online afterwards if we can arrange that. There are 5 different types of resources permaculture uses. The first one is resources that disappear or degrade when they are not used. Well, basically all organic harvest is one of these resources. If you don't pick your apple, it will go rotten. So make sure that when there is harvest, harvest it. But there's also some things that are maybe less obvious. For example, rain and sunshine. When we hear the rain, we often don't see it as a resource, but if you basically catch your rain and use it for watering plants, you can even clean it so you can drink it yourself, etc. And also the example of the sun. On roofs in the Netherlands at least, most of them look like the top picture. So there's just tiles there. And all this sun heats up your tiles, but if you would put solar panels there, you can basically provide in more than your own energy need. And that's a resource there is. I mean, there's no energy shortage, people. We just have to harvest it. And this is a very good example of how basically every day we waste a resource because we don't see it and we don't use it when it's there. Then B, resources that increase by using them. This might sound a bit contradictory because we are always taught that things that are scarce are valuable. That's not true, or at least not always. What are resources that increase by using them? Knowledge, for example. Well, that's one of the reasons why this whole convention was raised, wasn't it? Share knowledge. If you share knowledge, more people think about it and they can give you feedback. And so when you share knowledge, it starts to increase. It's the same for talents. If you practice your talents more often, you get more of it. You'll become better. And last, but also not least, is cooperation. If you cooperate more often with the same people, you can start to trust them more, and you can get a stronger bond. So these are all resources that increase by using them. Then next, resources that remain unchanged by their use. For example, bricks, an old bathtub, etc. And you can be very creative with this. In the picture, you see a herb spiral with a little pond there, and the pond is actually made of an old plastic bucket or for putting in building materials, and you can see old stones. If you use it in this way, you can actually use it as a resource and it doesn't really change. The same is for an old bathtub. You can use that for a small pond in your system. In this way, also car tires have been used to build pumpkin gardens and potato gardens. So it's really a way of looking at things, and it can be a nice thing to practice actually. Like when you have a lot of rubbish, just think of how can I use it? Can I use it in a way that's useful? And then D, resources that are depleted by their use. Basically, that's fossil fuels, certain ores, etc. And what permaculture says is that great dependence on these resources is dangerous, and I think you can explain a child of 6 why, because they are there just once. And if you basically make a society that's totally dependent on a resource that isn't a resource that continues to be there, you're basically building a society that is, well, at least prone to self-destruction once that resource turns out. Well, I think oil is one of the best examples for this. Just to give you an example, in our current agriculture system, for every 1 calorie of food we produce, we use 10 calories of fossil fuel. So at the moment, we're simply eating oil, and that's, well, it can be tasty, but I'm not sure if it's very smart to do, especially not if we want to eat also in 100 years. Then other resources that pollute and or destroy when used. For example, pesticides, herbicides, you think you can solve a problem by killing your bugs with a pesticide, but the pesticide stays there. It destroys one time, and you never know where those pesticides are going to end up. I think a very famous example is DMT, a poison they used in agriculture, and it ended up killing basically all of the birds of prey. before they figured it out, and it's also poisonous to humans. So what does permaculture use? Permaculture primarily uses resources from category A, B, and C. So that this, well, I'll give them here again. They use some from category D because they are scarce, but if you have them, use them, especially if you make a system that's basically sustainable in the long run, but it definitely doesn't use any of a category of E. If you have a problem in a permaculture system, you don't use pesticides, you try to figure out the system and try to introduce its natural enemies, or you try to make the system less attractive for the animal to begin with. Then permaculture as a design system. This is the permaculture logo. I'll just explain shortly a bit about the symbolism. As you see, it's a snake, and for the people noticing, it's a snake that eats its own tail, also known as the Ouroboros, but it has an affinity loop in it. So it's really about setting up systems that are going around. It's going to the hydrosphere, to the air, the water, the living material, and the soil, and it's cycling. And it's cycling, and if you put in a good system, you can basically go on with that system forever. Then also think in terms of inputs and outputs and closing cycles. For example, in the Netherlands, we basically waste one resource, human manure, for example. We flush that out to sea, or we harvest it. While it's very odd, because they contain a lot of nutrients we're not using at the moment. And to some people, I can imagine it's an odd idea of actually composting your own manure, but it's really odd that we now get a lot of fertilizers that is made from oil, and we use our own nutrients. We flush them away because we think they're pollutants. So that's really about permaculture. Learn to think in cycles. See how you can diminish your inputs and see how you can use the outputs of the system for another input in your system. Well, two things I like. Labor is really neat that is not taken care of by the system. What do I mean with that? For example, if you have a lot of snails and you have to pick up your snails from the garden, you have to do work. So obviously there's something not working maximally. A very famous saying of Bill Mollison itself is, you don't have a snail problem, you have a duck shortage. So try to get ducks that eat snails, and then you can eat the duck yourself again if you like. So then you solved one of your problems, and you also introduced a new resource which you can eat yourself. Then the last one is pollution, is every output that cannot be used by the system. Basically, the earth in itself is one big recycling system. So make sure that your own system also has this. And then if the output of another plant or animal or whatever in your system can be used by another as a resource, you basically never run out of resources and you never have any pollution. And that's a bit what sometimes I call permaculture is a lot older, but cradle to cradle is known by a lot of people, and permaculture is basically a bit cradle to cradle in the agriculture area, I would say. This is the end of my presentation. Just to end with a last quote of Bill Mollison: we can turn forests into deserts, or deserts into forests. It is our choice.